but if not, then perfectly fine. So yeah, my name's Merrisa Naidoo. If we can move over to the next slide, please. Okay, so I want to tell you a little bit more about myself, and I'm going to start off by sharing this fun fact with you that my name actually means ruler of the sea. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm telling you that. And the reason for that is because, to much of your surprise, I actually have a background in marine biology. So I believe that my name and my chosen career path worked quite well, and coincidentally, my love and passion for the ocean and the life that's related to it has been one of my biggest motivations in advocating for a plastic-free world, which is part of the reason that I've come to join or represent two movements, which is called Gaia, which is the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives and Break Free from Plastic, Africa as the Africa Plastics Campaigner. So it is a great privilege of mine to be among young leaders once again. And I say young leaders once again because I identify very well with the mission and the vision of young people, as I myself was a former youth leader of a movement called the Youth for Marine Protected Areas in South Africa. I firmly believe that young people are not only the leaders of tomorrow, but are also the custodians of a better future. And I believe that by us broadening our circles of friends today, so I believe that we're here not only to engage, but also to stay connected for the longer term and share knowledge with one another. And in that way, we can truly drive change for the future of our planet and its people. So now that I've told you a little bit about myself, I want you to tell me a little bit about yourself. So on to the next slide, please. So we're going to get to know each other a little bit, and there's very few of us here, so you're welcome to unmute and tell me a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what inspires you as a young person. If you're an introvert or a little bit shy, you're also welcome to just add it into the chat. So we can take a few minutes. For those, I see we've lost a few people. But for those that we have in the room, you're welcome to just add your feedback into the chat, or you're welcome to unmute and just share a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what inspires you. So if we can take a few minutes to do that. Okay, do you all hear me? Are you able to add something into the chat?
Yes, we're working.
Okay. Okay, we'll give it about 2 minutes. I know we all type at different speeds. Hi, it's a pleasure to meet you, Palani from South Africa. I'm also from South Africa. Palani says she's a Greenpeace Africa volunteer, and her passion is to help overcome the climate crisis and use her power wherever possible in order to do so. That's awesome. Thanks, Julia and Fanny, for also sharing a little bit about you. Great. Alrighty, Alf, you're welcome to share whenever you are ready. I guess we can move on then. So what are we here for today? Why are we here? We're here to learn about the problem of plastic pollution and its effect on the environment, how plastic pollution and social justice is connected, the inequalities of plastic pollution, and how to prevent and tackle the problem of plastic pollution in a just way. But we're also here to learn from one another. And before moving on today and getting into the crux of the content of this presentation, I would like to just share that this is a safe space that we create here today, where questions, concerns, and open discussions will also be encouraged from you. And given the fact that we're all from different parts of the world, if I'm going too fast in the way I speak, please be free to either indicate that in the chat whenever you can. If you feel like I'm going too fast, or just stop me and I will slow it down a bit. Alrighty, so let's get into it then. Our next slide, please. Okay, to get us started, during my studies as a marine biologist, a lecturer of mine shared something with me that changed the way I see and perceive the world today. And that is that there isn't a single place on planet Earth where plastic cannot be found. Today, it has even begun making its way into the human bloodstream and our lungs, making us believe that we are living in the age of plastics. From the time we wake up until the time we go to sleep, we've included plastic in our routine somehow or the other. It has so much so become an inescapable part of the material world, flowing constantly through every human experience, in everything from plastic bottles to bags, even to the clothes we wear on our bodies. From mountaintops to the depths of the ocean, plastic seems to be everywhere. And to demonstrate the magnitude of the plastic crisis, we're going to play a short game, which is called a true and false quiz game. And we can move on to the next slide. So for this game, I'm going to read out short statements, and you're going to simply tell me whether you think that statement is true. You can indicate that with a T, or whether it's false, indicated with an F. And like before, we can use the chat function to do this. So if we're all ready, maybe you could use the thumbs up to tell me you're ready, and we can head into the game. Okay, awesome. Alrighty, so let's move to our very first statement. And that statement is that, I know that looks like a 7, but it's actually a 1. Approximately 91% of plastic is recycled. So do you think that statement is true, or do you think it's false? So remember, if it's true, a T; if it's false, an F. Okay, I see some answers coming through. And shall we reveal our answer? On to the next slide. Okay, so everyone said it was false, and it seems like you're all plastic experts, and that is false indeed. Only 9% of all plastic ever discarded since 1950 has actually been recycled. Almost every piece of plastic ever made still exists in some shape or form. We can't recycle our way out of the plastic pollution crisis. And we believe that the best way to solve plastic pollution is to stop producing so much unnecessary single-use plastic in the first place. Okay, so that was the first statement. How about the next one, Fanny, if we move on? Alrighty, so the next one is true or false. Humans use about 1.2 million plastic bottles per minute in total. Do we think that's true, or do we think that's false? Does it seem a bit drastic, or does it seem somewhat like we could use that much? Okay, alrighty, shall we reveal the answer then? Okay, we can move on to the answer, Fanny. So next slide, please. All right, so for those of you that said it was true, I know it can sometimes seem unbelievable, but roughly half of our global annual plastic production is destined for single-use products like plastic bottles. Okay, and on to our next statement. Okay, plastic is toxic and affects human health. Is this true, or is this false? So we'll take a few minutes to gather our answers from everyone. Okay, awesome. I see that we have all our answers more or less in. Shall we reveal? All right. So it is indeed true. As a matter of fact, 144 chemicals or chemical groups known to be hazardous to human health are actively used in everyday plastic products. We, in fact, ingest an entire credit card's worth of plastic a week, and at least 74,000 plastic particles, microplastic particles a year from the air we breathe, the water we drink, and even the food we eat. Okay, seems a little bit scary, but we'll move on to the next one. The last and final statement is enough plastic is thrown each year to circle the earth 2 times. Do you think that 2 times seems realistic, or do you think it could be more than that? So is that statement true or is that false? Okay. Great. All right, shall we reveal our answer? Okay, for those of you that believe it's more, enough plastic is actually thrown each year to circle the earth 4 times. The global annual plastic production has increased from 2 million tons in 1950 to 381 million tons in 2015. All right, and that comes to the end of our little exercise. And I want to just thank you all for participating in that. You're all such sports. And I hope that gives you a brief insight into how big of a crisis we have on our hands. So to take it back a little bit and to move on to our next slide, let's try and understand where did this crisis all begin. Now, the 20th century was filled with numerous inventions that greatly influenced the world. However, an invention that made the most dramatic impact was that of plastics. And plastics was welcomed as the so-called wonder material because of its endless possibilities to design different products from it. The advent of plastic dates back to only about 150 years ago, which is a relatively short period of time for a material that has managed to colonize our daily lives and become an increasing environmental threat worldwide. But this upward trajectory is far from over. Next slide, please. The current reality of the plastic pollution crisis is this. It is projected that under business as usual scenarios, that is, if we had to carry on doing what we're doing at the moment, this is what could happen by 2060. Firstly, the use of plastics could almost triple globally, while richer countries are projected to double their plastic use. The largest increases are also expected in emerging economies such as sub-Saharan Africa and Asia. Secondly, plastic waste is also projected to almost triple by 2060, with half of all plastic waste still being landfilled and less than a fifth being recycled. And thirdly, plastic leakage into the environment is projected to double to 44 million tons a year, while the buildup of plastic in aquatic environments will more than triple, increasing and exacerbating environmental and health impacts. I agree with you, Rebecca. It is indeed scary. So, who do we think is to blame for fueling this crisis, for creating this continuous loop of high mass production and consumption? Is it you and I, or is it something greater, much bigger than us? On to the next slide. To answer that question, nearly all plastics, up to 99%, are made from fossil fuels. That is oil, gas, coal, which is extracted from oil fields and fracking drill pads that belong to multinational petrochemical giants whose agenda to flood the world, its oceans, rivers, agricultural soils, and even our desirability with plastics has been successfully achieved in the name of convenience and progressiveness. The petrochemical giants are now getting a bit scared because the world is starting to look towards energy transition, renewable power, electric vehicles, making the grid greener. And this is making them nervous, which is why they are looking towards petrochemicals, and plastic seems like the perfect material to push these petrochemicals out. Currently, 6% of total oil production is used by the plastic sector, and it is estimated that this will come to represent 20% by 2050. Now, I want to screen a snippet from a movie which is called The Story of Plastic, which has been produced by the Break Free from Plastic movement. And this movie is, it's very short, a short snapshot rather into the entire film. The film is an hour long, but I want to demonstrate how the petrochemical industry through plastic production are affecting the day-to-day lives of local communities. As we know, we are gathered here today to address the issue of plastic pollution and social justice. So let's look at the injustices before we can start righting them. On to the next slide. Okay, so this is titled The Story of Plastic, How Plastic Production Pollutes Towns. And we can now begin to watch the snippet with the next slide.
Plastics are treated as a product that miraculously appears from nowhere, and it goes to nowhere. It starts when the oil and the gas leave the wellhead, and it keeps on being a problem at every step in the stage along the way. Why is it that we're seeing so much more plastics entering the environment? And there's no better place to be talking about that than here in Houston. This is the story of plastics.
The east end of Houston all the way to Baytown, it's almost a pattern. You have a refinery, a park, a school. A refinery, a park, a school. A chemical plant has a huge amount of green space next to it and is usually across from neighborhoods. Then a refinery, a park, a school, storage facility, a park, a neighborhood. Most of the industry along the Houston Ship Channel is the chemical complex, is the chemical cluster. So the chemicals are used for products, for plastic products. And I don't think people know that.
Chemicals cause health issues to the respiratory system, neurological system, cardiovascular systems. And so community members in this area are constantly reporting health issues in terms of breathing, in terms of headaches, nosebleeds.
Other people don't have to go through this. Why should we?
Far before the plastics enters our oceans and enters our waste streams and enters our food supplies, it is entering the communities that are being affected by this build out every day. And their reality is a reality that we've paid too little attention to for too long.
Like, most of these people want to talk, they want to speak, they have no idea. They've been living here their whole lives. They'll come out to meetings and say, I had no idea that I was being exposed to X chemical for X amount of years, that it had any sort of like effects on my health or on my children. They'll say, I've been living here my entire life and I never looked at the refinery as hurting me.
That is part of the hidden story of plastics, and it's a part that needs to come into the light.
I would want someone who goes into a store to look at a plastic product to know that poor rural communities with no resources are experiencing the fracking. I want them to know that it took a pipeline, an 18-wheeler to cross through a community, because there is no 18-wheeler traffic in nice communities. That is being transported and it is being refined, and that it is causing everything from contamination of groundwater in rural communities to pipeline leaks and spills from point A to point B, and then when it gets over to our communities, that same material, that same raw material is being processed, that it's letting off toxic fumes, that it is shortening the lifespan of people, that it is shortening the lifespan of children, because folks who have lived in these communities and who have suffered the impacts have never seen one tear, have never seen $1, have never seen one organizer in their communities trying to stop the toxic health impacts. That's what I want them to know, that it is killing people. It's a very real thing for us. It's our lives.
Okay, now I don't know about you, but that always is a little bit hard for me to watch, especially to see how this problem is affecting people's lives. And I think we have a few more people that have just joined us. So for those that have joined us, welcome. We are a little bit into the presentation part of things, but not too far off. And I've just sort of screened a mini video with how petrochemical industry is affecting the livelihoods of people or fence line communities that live near these industries. Okay, so having watched that, shall we take a few moments to reflect on what we've watched? And maybe we could use our next slide as our guide. So again, I'll invite you to either write your responses in the chat, or if you're brave enough and want to unmute and speak them out, you're welcome to do so as well. So let's share with each other, what did you see and how did it make you feel? Maybe I can go first. So what I saw was fence line communities, as I said, being affected by this crisis, and industry being the reason as to why they are living in the way they are and not being accountable or held accountable, for the lives of these people. How did it make me feel? Sad, but also angry that this should not be the way things should be allowed to continue. So I see Julia's also shared with us a little bit. So as I said, inviting you all to share a little bit. What did you see? How did it make you feel? Okay, we'll take a few moments to populate the chat and then we'll move on. Okay, thanks for sharing, Palani. So Palani says, I see lack of service delivery and corporates aren't held responsible for their actions. It makes very emotional and more driven to do something about this. Definitely agree with you. So the next question was, what should we do about it? And we'll answer that as we go along in the presentation, what action we can take against this crisis. Is there anyone else that would like to share? Alrighty, so if you want to share, feel free to just continue adding to the chat. And also, I see there's some engagement from a few other people in the chat as well with how animals suffer from plastic pollution. So yeah, if you also want to just comment as I'm going along, please feel free to do so. Okay, so to summarize what we've just watched, this is only the start of how the plastic crisis is met with environmental and social injustices. As we've heard it from the little movie there, is that when oil and gas leaves the wellhead, it not only stops there, it continues becoming a problem at every step of the way, and to our downfall has implications for our health and our livelihoods of communities. So I'm going now to move on to a short exercise to demonstrate how plastic is a problem at every stage of its life cycle, not just when it becomes waste material at the end and pollutes our environment, but it is a problem at every stage from the beginning right up until the end. So if we can move on to the next slide. So I've titled this exercise Hangman, the Plastic Life Cycle Edition. So again, I'm going to encourage you all to make use of the chat function, and you're going to guide me in guessing what each stage of the plastic's life cycle is. So with this exercise, I'm hoping that it will help us understand the different stages of plastic's life cycle. And at the end, I will unpack what are the impacts that we face, what that society and that the environment faces at every stage. So for this, I have given you each clues at each stage. So let's begin at the first one. But before beginning at the first one, I want to also just share one quick fact with you all. And that is, if the life cycle of plastics was a country, it would be the 5th largest greenhouse gas emitter on Earth, contributing negatively to the climate crisis. So with that in mind, let's move on to the very first stage. And if you were paying careful attention, I used this word at the beginning of my presentation. So nearly all plastics, up to 99%, are made from fossil fuels, oil and gas, and coal, which is something's missing, dash from oil fields and fracking drill pads. So can we guess what that phase is? Okay, we have some answers coming in. And so far you're all correct, extraction. All right, great. Okay, the next one then is during this phase, plastic products are made. So another word for made or manufacture. What do you think that phase is? Awesome. Okay, I should have made it a little bit harder, but never mind. Great. Okay, on to the third one then. People use plastic products during this phase. Okay, so what phase is this? The use of plastic. Okay. Alrighty, so we have some star players here. Great. Okay, and then the fourth one is once we are done using our plastic, it becomes what? Waste. Awesome. Okay, and then I see we're moving quite quickly. So the last one then is 2 words. The first one is an act of throwing away plastic or waste. And the other one is another word for setting fire to plastic to get rid of it. Okay. It's no problem, Palani. Burning is great. Awesome. Okay, thank you all for participating in that exercise and also encouraging everyone else that's here with us to also just participate as we go along, because this is ultimately for you all. All right, so if we move on to the next slide then. Okay, we can start unpacking what happens during each phase. So during the extraction phase, once fossil fuels, your oil and gas is extracted, infrastructure, including pipelines, transports raw materials, that's your oil and gas, to refineries or directly into the market, and it can release hundreds of toxins during pumping or piping of these feedstocks. So if I use the word feedstocks, it's referring to the raw materials, oil and gas that's used to make plastic. And that can cause a wide range of effects. This includes damage to sensory organs such as skin, eyes. It can have effects for bodily systems, including our respiratory system, nervous system, the gastrointestinal tract. It can impair organs such as the liver and brain, and it can increase the likelihood of cancer, neurological, reproductive, and even cause developmental problems. And lastly, also impairing the immune system. So much of damage right at the beginning of plastic production phase or the extraction phase. During the production phase, what are the impacts associated there? Now, in order to produce plastics, your raw materials has to be turned into long repeating chains of molecules, such as ethylene and propylene. Now, these startup molecules are combined, and they are then processed to incorporate chemical additives, and thereafter are molded into plastic products. This process is referred to as your production phase. Now, during the production phase, emissions are also released that can impair the nervous system and can cause reproductive and developmental problems, as well as cancer, leukemia, and genetic impacts like low birth weight. Fence line communities located next to these production sites, like we saw in the video, and workers employed in the production facilities are often impacted by the daily threat of toxic exposure and potential accidents or incidents of death. Now, during the consumption phase, so we are the consumers, this directly affects us now when we buy these goods. As consumers, we are directly affected by the toxic impacts of plastic. Microplastics and hazardous chemicals are used in plastic products that can contaminate our surrounding environments, including air, water, and food, and even enter the bodies of animals and human tissue. The ingestion and the inhalation of microplastics shedding from products and hazardous additives leaching out of plastic products can also severely impact human health. During the waste phase, so as we know, only a small fraction of plastic waste is economically and technically viable to be recycled, nearly 9%, as we came across at the beginning of this presentation. Now, what happens with waste? If it's not recycled, it's ending up in landfills. It can lead to blockage of drainage systems, and that can lead to flooding. It is also unappealing and unsightly. And as Rebecca mentioned, it can trap animals. You know, animals are affected by this issue when it becomes waste. But if it doesn't become waste, it is generally dumped or it is burned. Now, the one fact that I would like to mention is that the waste industry in richer countries often also transports plastic waste to poorer countries for it to be dumped there. This is a concept known as waste trade or waste colonialism. And in this way, the vast majority of the plastic waste will start to enter the environment via landfill or and pollute the marine and terrestrial environment. And a smaller percentage that is actually burned, about 12%. Both these methods can release toxic metals, organic substances, acids, gases, and other toxic substances into the air. Some of these toxins that are released by plastics are some of the most toxic substances on Earth. And the inhalation of contaminated air, direct contact with contaminated soil or water, and ingestion of foods that are grown in environments that are polluted by these chemicals can lead to short-term and long-term health impacts. And these health impacts also affect workers and fence line communities. Now, you're probably wondering why I draw so much attention to fence line communities and workers. That is because they are at the front line of receiving most of these impacts from plastic pollution and plastic production. So in summary, plastic pollutes at every stage of its life cycle, from where the oil and gas is extracted at the wellhead, through its production and consumption, through to post-consumer waste. So that is the key message there, is that it's not just a problem downstream, it's a problem further upstream. Okay, on to our next slide. All right, so this is a quote that is quite relevant to us as young people. Now, the thing is, with plastics, it will ultimately, if we don't do anything about it, become the main ingredient of our grandchildren's recipes. what does that mean for us? It means that the real problem with plastics is that once they are produced, they never go away. How so? During the plastic production process, many chemicals are added to plastic to make it very hard for them to break down and very durable. And even when they do end up breaking down from being exposed to sunlight, to wind or water, they become very small particles we'll call either microplastics, now is even nanoplastics. And in many cases, plastics take thousands up to, hundreds to thousands of years to degrade. And with that as our message for the first half of my presentation, I would like to open the floor to a few questions, and we can also take the liberty of going into a short comfort break after we're done with some questions. So if I can ask Fanny to maybe stop sharing screen and I can see all of you. Yeah, so do you have any questions, even if it's comments or any feedback? You're welcome to add it in the chat, or you're welcome to unmute and speak freely. Just want to say that, again, this is a space of learning, so I don't know everything, and we're all here to learn from each other. So let's try and make the most of this time we have together. Okay, does anyone have any questions so far? Any comments? Sure, go ahead. I see a hand. I'm assuming it's Granis.
Gerans, please go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Merissa. Thank you, Yulia. Thank you for the wonderful presentation so far. Just something to add. Yesterday, I was going somewhere in Nairobi, and I've posted this on my Instagram. I saw cows eating plastics. Like there's a place where people are doing illegal dumping. I took a video of it, but deep inside I was asking myself, tomorrow I'll go to the nearest butchery and buy beef. And will I be eating the plastic that these animals are eating at this point? I was like, should I reconsider to be a vegetarian or something? But just find out that also our soils are polluted with plastics. So we can never like escape this. So when that quote that you posted some few minutes ago that says that plastics will be the main ingredient of our grandchildren's recipes, I think it's not going to take time. Like it's not going to be the grandchildren, it's us. Like it's your main recipe. I think when you say great grandchildren, it's so far-fetched because it's now. And there's a cartoon type of what do you call it? Infograph. It shows that in 2050 or 2030, we'll be going to a grocery shop or like the supermarket, and you'll buy fish. Then you'll be asking for plastic bags. Then they'll tell you it's inside the fish. Like, now take this without the plastic bag because it's inside the fish. So I believe this is a very urgent matter, and everyone need to hear it and see it. Over.
Thank you so much for sharing that experience with us. I think, yeah, I definitely agree with you. Very urgent, very crucial that we address it now. We cannot wait. There's no time, and the time is now to address this problem. And maybe I'm not sure if you all are aware, but we have a plastics treaty that's on our hand at the moment. And that is going to be the biggest and the greatest instrument that we can use to influence, exactly how we curb this problem and how we address this problem, I think. So yeah, I will be also going through the treaty a little bit more and what it entails later on. But I definitely agree with you that, yeah, it is us. We are currently being affected by it. We see it on a daily basis. It's not something that the future generations are only going to see. It's us that have to deal with this problem. So thank you for sharing that. Is there anyone else that wants to, even if you just want to share an experience the way Karen's just shared, you're welcome to. You can raise your hand or you can just unmute and speak. I know we're all shy at first to speak, but Palini, you're being nominated. I'd love to hear your voice, not to put anyone on the spot, but if you want to say anything, you're welcome to.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'll just share quickly because I'm kind of in a noisy environment. I have been personally fighting against plastic use and how do I say, packaging materials for food distribution. So every time someone tries to distribute food in a function or a gathering, it's always with plastic spoons and polystyrene materials. And I'm really trying to make the effort to move away from that, although it's not financially possible because compostable materials are very expensive and very rare to find that are disposable. So the only option I can think of is hiring a catering service right now, but it is financially not complying. So, but it is a fight. There is another option as well, such as banana leaves. You can use banana leaves to serve food, but it has to be like not liquid type of food. So, and we also have to find the source of it. It's not common in where I am on the coast. So that's what I am trying to do.
Great. Thank you for your efforts, Palini. And I can just maybe say that in South Africa currently, I have interacted with 2 organizations that are trying out refillable and reuse systems. So I'll be more than happy once I've met with them and engage with them further to be able to connect you, and you can see how you guys can collaborate to make this a bit more bigger of an effort. Yeah. Julia, do you maybe have a response or something you'd like to share?
Yeah, I just wanted to share some thoughts. Yeah, like I'm really upset, like in Sweden, a lot of people recycle and you think that you're doing a good thing, but then that recycling is actually, like shipped to like Africa or other like poorer countries, and that's really upsetting. And I think this needs to be up for more public debate in Sweden than it is, because I think people like, but I can use a lot of plastic because they recycle it, but then it doesn't really get recycled. So I think this is a really important thing to bring up here as well, even though, because we don't really see the issue firsthand. So and we need people to talk about it. I just wanted to share that.
Thanks, Julia. Yeah, waste trade is a very big issue, and it's currently quite heavy in Latin America, Asia, parts of Asia, Africa as well, experiencing it. And I will shed some light a bit on it as well a bit later. And there is an instrument in place for it, but it just doesn't address the entirety of the problem. Yeah. Anyone else before we go on to our short break? Sure, Fanny, go ahead.
Yeah. No, it's better. Hi, sorry, some technical issues since me and Julia are in the same room. Sorry about that. Yeah, just like a reflection, that's like how interconnected the fossil fuel industry is with the plastic industry and also the agricultural industry. So it's like a big package of industries that are actually fighting very hard to like keep us in this plastic addiction. And it must be such a huge lobbyism for us not to stop use plastic. I just like, that's a reflection from my side. So it must be really, really hard to fight this. And it's also really important to do it since it's such a great issue. But like the bad industries are very like a joint in this fight for us to continue to use plastic and other different shitty things, basically. Yes. I become very upset.
I hope towards the end we won't be so upset, and we'll have solutions to work on. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that sharing. I'm just seeing something in the chat. Harry,
commitment in assisting this team in place. You have expressed patriotism that though you are outgoing, you do not just walk away and say, let other people come and take care of it. And you have been very committed and you have really assisted in getting this thing to get to work.
Sorry, I'm not getting you, Evans. Do you just want to repeat what you were saying?
Sorry for interrupting.
You were saying something though, was it in contribution to what we were discussing? Okay, all right. Maybe if you want to type it in the chat, if that's okay. Yeah, all right. And we also have a comment from Harry. Harry, I don't see you here. I'm just trying to see. Okay, I think he may have.
No, he's here still,
oh,
but no picture.
My eyes are bad. All right. So Harry just saying that he agrees with Karen's, especially here in Nairobi. The problem is that there are so many cartels that really make it hard to actually implement policies that are set in place. Yeah, Harry, that is very correct, because what I can say is that currently we were investigating like plastic bag bans in Africa. And we find that the countries that have the strongest policies are actually undermined by countries where, you know, there's sort of black market for plastic bags and other. So they try, it becomes, the markets become infiltrated because of, you know, the black market essentially. So yeah, I think in those instances, like in Africa, for example, I think there's almost 34 countries out of the 54 states that have passed laws and policies for plastic. But implementation and enforcement is not the greatest. But we do know that our leaders in Africa is Rwanda at the moment, Tanzania, you know, and I think there's lessons to be learned there. So yeah, we can definitely I'll be able to share more about the African situation a bit later as well. All right. Okay, if there's nothing else, and we'll definitely have more time for questions, but maybe we can take a short 10-minute break just to refresh ourselves and come back a bit rejuvenated. I know it's been almost a full hour. So can we be back here around 12:05? Is that fine, Julia? I'm not sure the time.
Yeah.
So,
Or 13:05 or whatever time you're at in your country.
Okay, so 10 minutes time, we'll see you all back here.
Great.
Awesome.
La vérité dans l'amour. Et sur ce, je m'en vais vous dire, quand c'est mort les uns les autres, on finira un jour comprendre pour pouvoir vivre en paix. C'est pourquoi ma tournée au Cameroun m'a inspiré et j'ai pu sentir l'accueil des mélomanes et mes amis les journalistes, combien l'amour réunit les hommes. Je remercie le Cameroun de m'avoir inspiré. Yaoundé, Douala, Garoua, Gaoundéré, Nettoua, Onsamba, Bafoussam. Allô, allô, Amina. Radio Bakia. C'est ça. Aha. Yo, bye. Campi Congo, poisson à la braise.
Okay, are we all more or less back? Maybe if you can just indicate with a thumbs up if you're back. I don't want to leave anyone out. Okay. So we'll wait 1 minute more just for everyone to get back. Maybe Rebecca, if you could share what you had put in the chat around combustible materials. Do you mean materials that burn easily? While we wait, not sure if you're back. Okay. All right. Is it okay for us to move along, Julia? Okay, great. All right.
I think actually, like Rebecca, maybe I shouldn't speak for her, but I think she means biodegradable.
Okay.
Because combustible, it's almost like the same word for biodegradable in Swedish. So I think
okay, okay. Okay, all righty, got you. Okay. All right, so as we went through the various stages of the plastics life cycle, we came across a few social and environmental injustices that it is associated with. Now, to explore this further, we're going to look at a few more of these injustices, and starting with those that are associated with the extractive economy, which is the current form that the plastics life cycle finds itself in, or the current form that it has actually taken. So onto our our first slide for the second half of the presentation then. So, okay, we can move on from this one. Sorry. Okay, so in order to understand the economy or the extractive economy versus the circular economy, let's first talk about the concept of economy. Now, the economy is somewhat how well or how badly one manages the resources of a country or even of the world. But today, most people associate the word economy with money, trading, stock markets. But it all depends on what the actual purpose of the economy is. Currently, the purpose of the economy has turned out to be where mostly resources are used up in order to profit a few rich people or a few rich countries. This is known as the extractive economy or capitalism, as some call it as well. So if we move on from this, to explain the extractive economy a bit more, next slide, please.
Yeah. Gargania.
Sorry, I'm getting some feedback. Okay.
Sorry, I mean.
Okay, great. Okay, so the extractive economy is also described as the linear economy. Now, why linear? So linear is because it flows in one direction. You have extraction, production, consumption, and disposal. And this is the exact form that the plastic's life cycle takes. Now, with that in mind, resources such as oil and gas that are used to produce plastics are taken out of the earth time and time again without ever being replaced. And that is why it's the extractive economy, because it never gets replenished. And this economy works to exploit labor from workers who have no choice but to earn a living in order to survive. They are paid less than their work is worth, because the goal of the extractive economy is to ultimately make a profit. They often work under harsh conditions and are exposed to chemicals and toxins that are injurious to their health. And you would think that governance would be in place to protect people's rights. But that's actually not the case, because governance in an extractive economy protects the economy ultimately, wanting to make money, wanting to make a profit. And it sometimes uses tough and visible policies, and even sometimes violence when challenged. But if we move on to the circular economy, which is something that we are striving for as activists, we can move on to the next slide. The circular economy has the opposite purpose to the extractive economy, and that is to use land, resources, life, and work for the good of the whole planet, as well as all of its people. Now, sometimes we also like to refer to the circular economy as a sustainable economy. Also, you'll hear the word regenerative economy. And this economy uses natural resources at a rate that works with the natural cycles. So we don't use it all up. To explain a little bit more about the principles that the circular economy is based on, next slide, please. The first principle of the circular economy that would make it ideal is that there should be zero waste. Now, zero waste is the conservation of all resources by means of responsible production, consumption, reuse, and recovery of products, packaging, and materials without burning and with no discharges to land, water, or air that threaten the environment or human health. Zero waste replaces the one-way extractive model with a more sustainable cyclic system that focuses on waste prevention and emphasizes chains of responsibility, connectivity, and inclusivity within communities, such as the formal integration of informal waste pickers. The second principle is that relationships should benefit all, not only the wealthy few, and we must move away from selfish competition. Thirdly, the circular economy must recognize that all things are linked. It must be able to protect biodiversity and cultural diversity. It must be able to protect and promote equality and justice for all, where people must work willingly and democratically. And the governance of a circular economy needs to be more deeply rooted in democracy and respectful of all kinds of traditions and cultures. So that would be if we were living in an ideal world. And if we can make it happen, it would be the best for us all, as to opposed to what we are currently going through right now. Now, on to the next slide. This is a visual, This is a visual representation of the linear or extractive economy versus the circular economy. As you can see, the linear economy flows in one direction, but the circular economy, things come back into the economy and back into the environment and is retained and moves in a circular motion as such. Okay. So that was just to show you that what are some of the injustices. It starts at the economy level as well. If we move on to the next slide, and this is what we were all talking about, waste trade and waste colonialism. Now, waste trade refers to the export of waste from one country to another, and it breeds environmental injustices in the form of waste colonialism. Waste colonialism is the illegal form of waste trade that allows for the importation of toxic, non-recyclable waste from rich countries, primarily global north countries, to global south countries, because they can't or they won't try to manage their own waste. And that places a burden of their waste onto poorer countries and people. And that essentially erodes the foundations of liberty and even environmental justice that we have come to now. Plastic waste is exported under the banner of plastic recycling. And that's how a lot of these countries are getting away with shipping their waste over to other countries, because they say that it's going over to these other countries to be recycled. But we know that that's not the case, because only 9% of plastic has been recycled so far. And that number does not seem to ever be increasing. Okay, so if we look at the regional influence and the dynamics between global north and global south countries, we move on to the next slide. Some of the top exporters include the United States, Germany, UK, Japan, and Australia, who are placing a disproportionate toxic burden on the environment and the communities in importing countries. This is primarily Latin America, Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and South and Southeast Asia, as well as Africa. Now, there are 3 known cases for waste colonialism on the African continent, and there could potentially be more, but currently these are the 3 we know of. Firstly is where 282 containers of plastic waste was exported from Italy to Tunisia under the guise of mixed municipal waste. The second one was where Nigeria was found to be receiving illegal PVC plastic waste from the US. Now, the reason it is illegal to be receiving this waste from the US is because the US is a non-party of the Basel Convention. So I don't know if you remember the instrument I spoke about earlier that helps to control waste trade to countries. So the US is actually a non-party. They're an observer of the Basel Convention. So for them to be exporting their waste to Nigeria would be considered to be illegal. The third one is Accra in Ghana receives a substantial amount of textile waste, right? So textile waste in the form of clothing comes a lot into Ghana from global north countries and is often coming in as a guise of charity. This is also the case with electronics that come into Africa. So from the global north countries, electronics are also exported into African countries under the guise that it is because they want it's to develop Africa, or it's for us to have technology available to us. But this is actually waste. Half or more than half of those electronics don't even function. Okay, so if we move on to the next slide, what does this do? The dumping of waste in Africa undermines, in Africa and throughout the world, wherever it is being dumped. It undermines the milestones and the achievements that these countries are making in terms of plastic policies and legislation. And as I said earlier, Africa has been leading the fight against single-use plastics, where 34 African states have passed laws banning some plastic items. It also promotes false solutions, such as advanced recycling technologies. I'm not sure if you've heard of these terms, but the term chemical recycling, plastic to fuel or plastic to chemical processes, as well as incineration or burning of plastic, those are considered false solutions to addressing the plastic crisis, and waste trade promotes these false solutions. These false solutions create severe health implications for workers, communities, and the environment by generating significant amount of greenhouse gases, toxic air pollutants, highly toxic ash, and other potentially hazardous residues. Plastic waste trade also construes a system that excludes waste pickers from earning a safe and fair livelihood. They are forced to deal with the environmental pollution, low-grade recyclables, and heaps of residual waste produced by multinational corporations in the global north. So we think that this waste is coming into these countries and that waste pickers will be able to recycle it, but that's not actually the truth, because what happens is that the waste that we're receiving is low-grade recyclables or materials that are very hard to recycle, and they actually end up either going into dump sites or being burnt. Okay, so if we move on to the next slide. So as I mentioned, the Basel Convention is an instrument on transboundary movements of wastes, and it introduced important restrictions to better control plastic waste trade globally in 2019. However, a similar instrument exists for Africa known as the Bamako Convention, of which there are about 21 signatories in Africa that have signed on to this convention. But both these conventions lack power to address the plastic life cycle, to address it across its entire life cycle, and essentially, attack the root cause of the global plastic waste dumping. It's as good as saying by banning plastic waste exports without reducing plastic production, it doesn't really work, it doesn't really make sense. So that will likely trigger more dumping, landfilling, burning, causing toxic pollution, and ultimately exacerbating the climate crisis. If we move on to the next. All right, so in terms of plastic and waste pickers are also, they also bear the brunt of waste trade and of the plastic crisis. Waste pickers constitute the backbone of the recycling system in many countries by reclaiming, sorting, and selling discarded scrap materials. There are an estimated 20 million waste pickers worldwide, who are predominantly women from socially and ethically marginalized communities. Plastic comprises approximately 20 to 40%, and in some cities, over 50% of the waste that are handled by waste pickers. Their work is very valuable because it decreases the need for virgin material for production, it conserves scarce natural resources and energy, and it reduces water, air, land, as well as climate pollution, and ultimately keeps our cities clean. But, and a very big but, they also face a grave deed of injustice. If we move on to the next slide. Waste pickers are often invisibilized. They face low social status, have long working hours with difficult and risky labor, and earn low and irregular incomes. They are also often perceived as being dirty, criminalized, and harassed by citizens, police, municipal workers, and scrap traders. They even lack access to information, social security benefits, finance, markets, training, and technology, and get very little support from the local governments. They also face the threat of displacement due to the competition from organized industry, privatization of waste collection contracts, and lack of access to waste, which is caused by incineration, plants, and other waste facilities. But all is not lost when it comes to waste pickers, because at the moment, the Plastics Treaty that was mandated in March this year was mandated with the inclusion of waste pickers, for them to be more involved in the treaty process and the outcomes of what that process will look like. So with the hope that they will be more included in as we go along. That is the hope. And yes, it is quite sad. And one way that we've been working with waste pickers is to try to get them to organize themselves. So by forming these big waste picker groups or organizations, they have they become more respectable or respected in the municipalities or in the communities they work with. You know, they have uniforms that mark them as formal workers. So that is the pride that we're trying to work towards to ensure that they have. Okay, all right. So I don't know how the energy levels are in the room, but I do have a short 5-minute break. I don't know if we want to take it or if we want to continue. How does everyone feel? Would you just like to stretch for a second or two? Okay, thumbs up if you'd like a break. And are we going to get any thumbs? Okay, all right. Okay, so we can move on. I'm just going to take a sip of water quickly. 1 second. Okay, so on the note of injustices, as I said, not all is not lost, and there is something to be hopeful towards. So how exactly do we break free from this plastic crisis that we find ourselves in? And that is what the next part of my presentation talks to. So if we move on to the next slide. So amidst the injustice of the plastic pollution crisis, here's how one global movement is fighting to end plastic pollution and foster environmental protection and social justice. It is not only Break Free from Plastic that is doing this, but it is also Greenpeace. It is Gaia, who is a member of Break Free from Plastic. And I will just go through Break Free from Plastic today, but the BFFP movement envisions a future free from plastic pollution. And since it launched in 2016, there has been more than 387 core members, 2,299 associate members, and just over 12,000 individual supporters from across the world that have joined this movement to demand massive reductions in single-use plastics and to push for lasting solutions to the plastic pollution crisis. BFFP member organizations such as Gaia and individuals share common values for environmental protection and social justice and work together through a holistic approach in order to bring about systemic change. Under the Break Free from Plastic core pillars, this means tackling plastic pollution across its entire life cycle, not just downstream, but the entirety of it, from extraction to disposal, focusing on prevention rather than curing this problem. Okay, so on to our next slide. So I will go through a few core approaches as to how Break Free from Plastic has been addressing the plastic crisis. If we move on to the next slide. Okay, the first thing that we are trying to do is to push for corporate accountability. And that is by shifting the burden away from individuals and communities and back onto those that are responsible for producing plastic. This can be done through direct actions as well as something that we call brand audits. So brand audits are essentially a step up from your ordinary cleanup. So your ordinary beach cleanup or community cleanup. It's used to document the brands that are responsible for producing the plastic. And from that, by doing that, we can be able to hold those brands and those corporates accountable for their pollution. Next slide, please. The second thing that we're trying to do is stop the petrochemical build out by delaying, if not stopping, the expansion of petrochemical industry through targeting expansion products, reducing access to finance, undermining the business as usual narrative, and working with the climate movement. Next slide, please. The third is to push for policy. Policy is going to get us to where we need to be, and strong policy and enforcement of it. By establishing policy at different levels that pushes governments, corporate, and consumer change in support of plastic reduction and builds opportunities at different levels. Next slide, please. One such policy is the current ongoing plastics treaty negotiations that I kept mentioning, and that is to end plastic pollution. So thanks to the tireless work of Break Free from Plastic, as well as Gaia members and its allies, this March, the United Nations Environment Assembly decided on a mandate to create the world's first plastics treaty, which is a legally binding international law aimed at reducing plastic pollution worldwide, covering the full life cycle of plastic. This historic step would have not been possible without the diverse movement of waste pickers, frontline community activists, and zero waste advocates demanding for systemic change. However, there is a long road ahead, and this will be in the form of a series of meetings through to the end of 2024, and they are referred to as INC. So if ever you come across the word INC, INC1, INC2, right up until INC5, it means Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee. And that committee is a committee of delegates from around the world that will be sitting and negotiating on hopefully the best possible treaty that we can get. It will be a mix of government, it will be different stakeholders, NGOs, it will be corporates to some extent, and waste pickers, as I mentioned as well. So, as I said, BFFP, Gaia, and its allies will be present during these sessions to make sure that that the issues are well represented. And, it's also going to take continuing pressure from people all over the world, including young people like yourselves, to get and ensure that we get a strong treaty at the end of it all. So to inspire you a little, I would like to show you how this monumentous announcement of a global plastics treaty went down at UNEA this March. And this was the announcement. And if we can play that short video for everyone.
And we will now turn to the draft resolution entitled End Plastic Pollution towards an internationally legally binding instrument, that is UNEA EA5L23. May I take it that the Assembly wishes to adopt this draft resolution? I see no objections. It is so decided.
Thanks, Fanny, for playing that for us. And the reason I played that video is because I'm hoping that we will move with the same enthusiasm, the same energy into the very first INC that will take place from the 29th of November this year to the 2nd of December. Okay, on to our next slide then. So continuing with the principles of Break Free from Plastic, one of it is also to build zero waste communities. And we consider zero waste communities as a model solution for addressing plastic pollution. Next slide, please. It is so important to also try and change the narrative. So we've been doing things the way we've been doing things for as long as we can remember, but it's time for a new normal, and demonstrating what a new normal looks like, what a plastic-free, disposable-free world looks like. And this will include debunking and discrediting harmful industry messaging and promoting real solutions, such as reduction, zero waste systems, and refill and reuse systems. Next slide, please. Sorry. We also do this through movement building. We believe the power of the people is needed to enact change and stand up to powerful actors. Now, in the very beginning of explaining BFFP, I mentioned that we had X amount of core members and associate members and individual supporters. It's those people that are going to make this work more meaningful. And without them, we cannot be able to achieve a plastic-free world. Okay, on to the next slide, please. All right. Now, in our efforts to end plastic pollution, we have to understand the difference between real action, real solutions, and false action and false solutions. So I want to take this time to go through what real action looks like and what it means versus what false solutions and what false actions look like. So if we go on to our next slide. Now, real solutions. Urgent, ambitious action is necessary to stop the impacts of plastic. Real solutions look something like this. It means to end the production and the use of single-use disposable plastic. It means to stop the development of new oil, gas, and petrochemical infrastructure. It means to foster the transition to zero-waste communities. It means to implement extended producer responsibility as a critical component of the circular economy. Now, what is extended producer responsibility? It is diverting the responsibility from your consumers to your producers, the ones that are responsible for producing the waste in the first place. It also means to adopt and enforce ambitious targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from all sectors, including plastic pollution. Now, the reason we say ambitious, we always have to be ambitious, and Karen's mentioned it earlier, is that it's urgent. It's really urgent that we get what we need, because if we have low ambition solutions or false solutions, it's not really going to get us to where we need to be. On to false solutions then. What does false solutions look like? These solutions, more often than not, have implications for health. They release harmful emissions or spur social and environmental injustices. And they are also inadequately researched as viable solutions. So these are solutions that you will hear industry making claims about, that this is the way to go, without really having done the homework about how viable these solutions are. And some of these include bio-based plastics, which are plastics made wholly or partially with biomass. The second one is biodegradable and compostable plastics. Now, I know there was a bit of chat about compostable and biodegradable plastics, but these plastics essentially have the similar sort of structure that ordinary plastic would have. And they're being broken down by using microorganisms. So do they really ever break down then? Do they really ever disappear? Then we on to chemical recycling. So chemical recycling is sort of this new kid on the block that everyone is a bit excited about, but we shouldn't be. Chemical recycling is transforming plastic waste into new plastic. It uses a whole lot of chemicals. It also uses burning technologies at some point in its process. And then we have our old friend incineration, which is the burning of plastics. We're also now trying to get a bit more fancy with oxo-degradable plastics, which plastics with additives that cause it to break down into smaller plastics. So you see, it breaks down, but it never disappears. Then we have plastic credits, which is the offsetting of plastic use. And lastly, plastic to fuel, which is chemically transforming plastics into fossil fuels. Most often than not, that fuel that is derived at the end is actually dirty fuel and cannot really be used for anything. It cannot go back into the economy. It cannot go back into making anything really substantial. Okay. All right. And with that, I have actually come to the end of my presentation. And I'll show you guys the next slide. And that is, I would like for us to end with one short exercise. So you've heard it all, and I believe that you are the future that will ensure that we get a plastic-free world. So with that, I want to know from you, what does a plastic-free world mean to you? What does it look like? What does a plastic world feel like? Now, for the artists in the room and for those that like to draw, you're welcome to, if you have some paper nearby, to take that and to sketch a quick picture. What does a plastic world mean to you? And for the ones that are more in tune with writing their thoughts out, you're welcome to type that in the chat. I do have some music that's about a minute long, and I know Julia also has some music that can play. So we'll take about 10 minutes to do this. Really encouraging you to draw or even write in the chat. Yeah, let's take 10 minutes and let's see what we all come back with. And we could do a nice maybe group photo at the end if we have some artwork. Julia, would you mind going? Oh, sorry, Fanny, the next slide. And that's our music. So if anyone's confused as to what we need to do, just to repeat it again, or I can just put it in the chat. What does a plastic-free world, what does a plastic-free world mean to you? What does it look like, or what does it feel like? So you're welcome to write in the chat, and you're also welcome to draw out your thoughts. And cue the music, Fanny.
te ao nā tura, tita pala tiki roto, te tai e nua e te rewa, au e aka motu te ture poka, mau te ko, mau te ere, ki a mai toku nā tura, no te ki a muri atu, ka aka pene koe. Ko pai ia, ai no te a ko pai ia, e tano e ko pai ia, ari mai ta o ta kutita. Isi a ko o, ai no te a isi a ko o, e tano e isi a ko o, ari mai ta o ta kutita. Hi-ha! Ta o ta kutita. Hi-ha!
Okay, I'm not sure if that was about 10 minutes or so. Does anyone need more time? Okay, maybe we can stop sharing for a bit and everyone can share their either they're in words. You're welcome to unmute and read out what you've written, or type it in the chat, or show us your little drawing. Either is fine. Great, Fanny. Do you want to maybe describe what that means? It's very cryptic.
Yeah, this was the thing that came up into my mind, because I think like the question mark stands for it's like that we don't really know what a plastic-free world looks like, because I think it's we are so much more affected and like entangled with plastic than we think we are. So a plastic-free world is a very different world, I think, because it's also connected to the financial system, as you said in the beginning of this presentation. And then it's the heart, and it stands for compassion. I think we will have a more like kind and warm world without plastic. And then the circle is a symbol for the planet Earth. So a more whole Earth. That's the critical answer I have.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I see Pauline is also trying to share with us her drawing, which is awesome. Do you want to explain, Pauline, what you've drawn?
Okay, so this is my vision of a perfect world. Okay, well, kind of a perfect water cycle if there's no plastic, because plastic kind of affects the ground soil and affects the groundwater and affects whatever the nature consumes from the soil and water. So, and it also affects the rain. So this is what the natural ecosystem would be without plastic consumption, like a perfect water cycle with evaporation and rain coming down with no contamination. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Some great visions coming through. Karen's, go for it. Okay, do you want to share with us what's there, Karen's?
Basically just living in utopia. So this is just the ocean somewhere here, the blue one, and the biodiversity is thriving. As you can see, like there's a fish over here. Why are you laughing, Palini? Then you have turtle over there. Then here we have beach. Then it's very clean. So my utopia is you have a clean ocean and a beach. And also you have a thriving biodiversity. And right here at the corner, oh, which side these are? We have people who are greater than profit. So that is my utopia. Yes.
Great, brilliant. people are profit, like we are valuable, our lives matter. So definitely awesome. Anyone else want to share? As I said, you don't have to be an artist. You can type something in the chat. I'm tempted to put someone on the spot. Rebecca, we haven't heard from you. We've seen all the chat going on. Do you want to maybe share with us? It'll be nice to hear your voice, or not. No? Okay. Anyone else? Victor, Hannah, Nick, Evans? Okay, so let's see what Rebecca is saying. Okay, I agree that ending fossil fuel exploration is a solution in the long run, but I'm talking about what individuals can do right here, right now. Okay, I guess with that, we can actually open this out to a feedback session or even a Q&A. I'm here, you can ask me something, but what do you think? Let me put it back onto you. What do you think you can do about this? You all are working, I'm sure, individually on something that's close to your heart towards this or towards something that is going on in our world. So what do you think is the answer or some of the answers? Anyone want to share? You can type it in the chat. We have about 10 minutes until closing. So maybe we'll take 5 minutes to do this and 5 minutes to round up.
Maybe I can go on.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I believe the solution starts with us. Just our lifestyle also can make a little bit of change. When we were together with Palin in Tunisia, we went to a restaurant and just a few minutes, like she pulled out a metal straw and I was like, whoa, awesome. I was expecting to get a plastic straw, but now, yeah, you have the metal straw. So it really helped me to cut down my plastic pollution. If you can get yourself a reusable water bottle, that also can make an impact. You can cut down your plastic footprint. And also at some point, because fossil fuels and plastics are the same thing. So also sometimes cutting down your, let's say, consumer type of mentality, like just consuming and consuming, you think about other things. So yeah, there's no need of you going to buy maybe coffee from Art Cafe at maybe 200 shillings and it being sold plastic, and you can get the same type of coffee somewhere else at the same time, at the same amount of money with carton packaging. So it's just a matter of rewinding our memories and mind and to choose better options. Yeah, over.
Thank you so much for that input, Karen. And I definitely agree with you that our individual efforts will make a change. But if we have to look at it at a bigger picture wise, it's going to take industry to cut back on what they're doing. Our consumption is influenced by their production ultimately. So if they cut back on their production and look at developing products and redesigning products that is plastic free and is actually reusable and refillable, then that would be what would be the best way forward as well. So Kamono is also saying individuals can choose reusable bags for shopping and refillable bottles for water, milk, cooking oil in an effort to have a zero waste community. That is also quite correct. And with a zero waste community, so just to explain a little further, the way I understand it is zero waste is also, so a lot of the waste we generate in our own households, most of that waste is actually organic waste. It's actually like, food waste. In fact, like almost 60% of the waste we generate in our households is organic waste. And that waste can be going into compost. It can be going back into the ground, back into the soil. Whereas the other remaining 40% or so is your dry waste. That is waste that is plastic a little bit. It could be paper and those kind of things. So ultimately, that 40% of dry waste that needs to be able to be recycled, or something productive needs to be done with it. So, but that's not the case, because we know that only 9% is recyclable. And most of the waste is actually residual waste that is multi-layered, that's difficult to recycle. So we don't really have much on our hands. It's just that we've got to be able to try and manage the unmanageable part, basically, almost. Okay. So some other comments that are coming in is needing to encourage informal settlements on how to discard their waste and contaminate their environment. Yes. Political pressure to tackle plastic and fossil fuel industry, definitely agree with that one. And of course, I think Rebecca's saying, I understand that different countries have different possibilities, but what we as individuals, at least in the rich part of the world, can do is recycle among many things. Yeah, definitely. Great. Okay, thank you all for that feedback and those inputs. You've been quite fantastic, and I hope that this workshop and my presentation has inspired you to and will keep you motivated and engaged to influence your individual work and some of the most crucial matters of our time. So thank you, everyone, and I will now hand back over to Julia, who will close up.
Yes, hi, it's me, and thank you so much, Merissa, for this really epic presentation and facilitation. And thank you everyone who participated in this and added to this really important topic. Me and Julia are really happy to have this topic today, and we would actually love to have your instant feedback. And just give me 1 minute to share screen again. Yeah, 10 seconds is more accurate. So here. So I just would like you to go into this QR code, or actually use the link that Julia will post in the chat. So either you can use your phone to take a picture of this, and then you come to Mentimeter, which is a really quick and instant feedback tool. And then first you will see like 4 statements. So just give your answer there, and then on the next slide there's an open question where you can give us what kind of feedback that you want to give us. And we are really thankful for all kind of feedback that you give us. It makes us to do these sessions even better in the future. So I will just give you like a couple of seconds to click on the link or to take a photo of this QR code, and then I just have one other slide to show you. Moving on. And the next slide is just to mention the next event that we will have. And it's about human rights and climate change. And it takes place in 2 weeks, I guess, on the 26th of October and the same time. And we will post this on Facebook and on Instagram. So make sure to follow Planet One on different kinds of social media platforms. Yes, and by that, I just say again, thank you so much, Merissa, and everyone. Yeah, hope to see you in the future for the other events and more to come. And please give us feedback. Yeah, thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye. Thanks for joining.
Bye.
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 Okay. Julia, are you happy for me to go off and?
Sure, if you don't want to, if there's nothing on your side that you want to bring up with me funny.
Sure, okay. So I'll see you back at 5 p.m.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day till then. Bye.
Bye. Ska jag avsluta med den? Bye.